And now, Fixed Ops Focus. Steve Shaw, who once fired a vending machine for low inventory, and Dave Rogers, who apologized to it afterwards. True story. Probably.
Dave Rogers, welcome. What's on your mind tonight, Dave? How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Hey, welcome back to the States there, bud. You know, how was your world tour? How'd that go?
Vacation was awesome. I think I got a little caught something along the way, but that's all right. It might have been for the fact that I was up for like 40 hours straight, flying home. So a little under the weather, but catching up on my sleep, getting back in the swing of things. I am waiting on though. I told you I took my Wagoneer in for service. Still waiting on parts 2 weeks later. So that might be a good discussion to have here. Let's talk about parts.
Let's talk about parts. I want to tell you a funny story that from years ago. So I had this parts manager, and it was at a Chrysler store. So you could probably relate to this, right? But every time we'd ask him a question, I'd ask him all the time, and it always seemed to me he was telling me a fairy tale.
Of course.
So I started calling him Mother Goose. That's what I started calling him, right? And I'd go to him and say, Mother Goose, can you tell me another fairy tale where this part was going to come from? Because it was always some in a deep, dark, enchanted forest thing, once upon a time. You could never get a straight answer from this guy, right?
Sounds right.
Yeah, I mean, and typical Chrysler, the things were back ordered and intergalactic back order was our famous saying, right? So one day I walk in there and I'm not in a particularly good mood, and it's one of these things. And I say to him, "Where's this part coming from?" And he says to me with a straight face, he looks me in the eye and he says, "Romulus." Right? And I started screaming at him. I like, "You stupid, mother, I'm losing my shit." And he's like, "No, there's a place in Michigan called Romulus, and that's where the part's coming from." I thought he was playing on the intergalactic back order thing.
Right. Star Trek.
So, yeah, that's my Chrysler parts guy story. And they probably have about 20 of them on to kill the guy every day, but yeah.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of talk out in the world about aftermarket parts, dealers having aftermarket parts franchise. I just talked to one recently, Mighty Auto Parts franchise, Napa franchise in their stores. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we offer it. I mean, it's something that we've been doing for a few years. I love since COVID, pre-tariffs, by the way, every manufacturer has been raising parts prices for the last 4 or 5 years, nonstop. Forget about the tariffs. We've had 15% increases, 10% increases, 4% increases. Like every quarter, the price tape goes up. All right. And listen, we're a dealership. Most of our markups are set cost plus, right? So the higher the cost, the higher the markup, right? So nobody's really complained about it. Well, the problem is right now you got, brake rotors, and I'm not going to name brands, but, when you offer somebody a brake job and it's $690, $700 because the brake rotors are $200, $250, we have to look for different alternatives. So, we've been working with Napa. We've been working with Eastern Auto Parts, which is a local one by us, and, different vendors that we have. And, offering people alternatives. I've been doing it for years. I can tell you years ago, I was in South Jersey. I was at a Nissan store. The Nissan power steering rack, it was like $3,000 for the rack, some stupid number for a reman.
Right. Right.
And, I went to the local guy and I got, a regular rack and pinion for $1,500, and it had a lifetime guarantee too. That was the other thing. Where the factory part had a 12-month, 12,000 mile guarantee on it, right? So, I've been offering that to customers instead of losing the job, instead of losing the work. I don't want to do that, but if I'm going to keep the job, that's the way I'm going to keep it. If I need to do that. So.
Been a huge advocate of aftermarket parts for years, and I going as far back as to when I was in store, we always offered aftermarket parts, just for those exact reasons. Why is it that the aftermarket can give us a lifetime warranty and the factory can only give us a 12/12? And like you said, some of those parts, I remember an air conditioning compressor, it was like $5,000 for an F-250, and you go down the street to the auto parts store going for $500. What do you do? And you're in the middle of nowhere. Customer doesn't care. All they care about is getting cold air. The customer does not know the difference between a Ford air compressor and, APCO or whatever the brand was.
Right.
So I would be a huge advocate of aftermarket parts.
And and listen, I think some of them are exactly the same replacement parts. They're made by the same manufacturer. They're just rebadged and they come through. But, we had, again, post COVID, we had parts sourcing issues, right? We had, and I gotta listen, I got a lot of guys and gals that work in my stores that are just, you know, they don't consider it. It's never been a thing. I'm not going to say what we call them, but the bottom line is that they drank the Kool-Aid and they think I only have to sell this OEM part. When we were coming again post COVID and you couldn't get the part, we had some alternators $450, $500 from the factory and nothing special. And then they're back ordered. You couldn't get them, because we had chip issues and everything else. And you go to the local parts store and they're $250. Like I'm not leaving the customer in a loaner car for a month for a back ordered alternator, plus charging them, cost me $450. I'm selling for at least $600, right? Whatever the case may be. So, yeah, and there was a lot of customers back then that were just going to take their cars. So, you had to convince them a little piece of the pie is better than none. Some of those parts have better warranties. Put it on the RO. It has a lifetime parts warranty. Maybe there's no labor warranty after 90 days, right? So put that on the RO. Listen, if this part goes bad lifetime, your only responsibility is to pay us whatever $200 in labor, and that's your guarantee. It's full disclosure, and I don't have a problem with it.
Well, and I don't have a problem with either, from a customer service perspective. If it's something we offer and I have to eat the labor, right? If I put this part on the car for whatever, if we make a decision that's in our business plan, we're going to do it. Why wouldn't I just eat that $200 in labor? Was a couple hours, and if I cost it out, it's still going to be fine. So I definitely like that. And, why wouldn't we offer both every visit on every service? And I think because if I said, hey, your alternator, your whatever part it is, if it has an aftermarket part, it's $500, and then the factory part is $1,000. Which one of these do you prefer, right? And sometimes it's you're going to pay this one for $500 and this one's $750, right? And what you're doing is putting a customer mindset that, hey, no matter what, you're going to pay X, and for a little bit more, you're going to get the factory, right? So you've set that tone with the customer. So for only $250 more, you're going to get the factory part or whatever. And so, but I think it has to become that routine, and it's not a option for our advisors. I think if we're going to do that, then we give the customer the option on any repairs that we are doing for their vehicle. Let them decide what do they want, especially now. I mean, the economy is crazy right now with prices, and I'd rather be the hero with my customer and give them an option for a lower price part and see what happens.
I agree 100%. I mean, and like I said, $600, $700 to put brake pads and rotors on a car. It's ridiculous. And I'm not talking about getting some cheap Chinese ones, the ones that are $7, but it doesn't need to be, it shouldn't be, a rotor shouldn't be $200 on a, Asian import or a Korean import car. It's just, a volume brand car. You want to tell me it's going to be $200 on a, F-350, right? Or, a Mercedes-Benz S-Class. We can have that discussion, but it shouldn't be on a, your regular everyday car. And, and I did have a meeting with an aftermarket supplier a couple of weeks ago, and I was supposed to have another one with a different vendor. One of them is offering to pay my door rate for labor if the parts go bad, right? Because that's always been the sticking point, right?
I think advisors come up with goofy reasons like, well, they're only going to pay $100 instead of $125. There's always that one like insignificant reason for an advisor not to do it, instead of thinking, hey, there's a customer over there and the customer wants this. And you can liken it to flying an airplane. And, for the greater part of my career, especially when I've traveled every day of my life, I made a decision to fly first class. And so an airplane ticket was $500, but a first class ticket was say $750 or whatever. For $200, $250, it's worth it to me to pay the extra, and the customer could say the same thing. Let me choose, which one that I want. I have trainers that say, you know what, and I pay them a flat fee for flying. You can either take the money, put it in your pocket, or, have a nice life and fly first class. it's your decision on what, on what you want to do, with that money. Make it the customer's decision, and you can't go wrong.
No, it goes back to the same conversation we had with maintenance, right? Some people like to over maintain their cars. Some people, and we always just assume, right? It goes back to that assumption thing. But when you're looking at an option, and again, the car's a year, 2, 3 years old, it's still under warranty. We should be offering the OEM stuff, right? We should be doing
Okay.
that. You get the car, it's 5 years old, it's out of the powertrain, might still have some emissions warranty on it. I still think you should be giving the customer the option, because if they say no to you and they go to the local independent, they're getting aftermarket parts. And you look like you're a crook. So why
Right.
wouldn't, like you said, why wouldn't you offer them both? And it's hard to get that through people's heads, but I agree 100%. And Steve, I've had luck over the years to tell customers, listen, I'm saving you $2,500 on this power steering rack job, just so you know. If the rack does go bad, it's 100% covered, the part and everything else. And I put it right on the RO. Instead of $200 labor, we only get charged $100 labor, whatever the case may be. And that's if it goes bad after the first 6 months. Usually within the first 90 days, the parts place will give you some money for it anyway, right?
Yeah.
Or you just eat it. You like you said.
How often do they go bad? Really?
They never go bad. That's the best thing about them. They never go bad. We're always worried about that one out of 10 times when something might happen, right? But
yeah,
it just.
Well, you and I were talking about once lifetime warranty. We were had that conversation, and I mean, if I was a dealer, I'd be offering lifetime warranty all day long.
Yeah.
Because the parts rarely ever go bad. So I just have this great marketing tool that I'm going to take care of you forever. And there's all of the setups and so on that make that work. But why wouldn't you? Because the parts don't fail. They rarely fail.
They rarely go bad the second time. Yeah. I have a meeting actually with somebody later this month on the program for the lifetime warranties.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a program. I've seen it before, but it hasn't been recent, so I'll get refreshed on it and see what it's like. Because there is a certain part of that where you do cover your butt,
Right.
So in case something catastrophic happens, right? So, but yeah, no, I agree 100%. I mean, and I don't think it matters, the aftermarket. Well, some of the manufacturers offer lifetime warranty. Like I think, Mazda has lifetime warranty on the brake pads. So they're competitive that way. A lot of the manufacturers have lifetime on exhaust pieces, mufflers and stuff. But I can't tell you the last time I've seen a muffler replaced. Like
yeah, right.
I don't know the last time we've replaced a muffler, right? Unless somebody hits something, but they don't normally go bad. So yeah, I mean, like you said, okay, lifetime on struts. Okay. I mean, that it might be worth, it's definitely a selling point, right? If you do struts once, you don't have to do them ever again for the guy keeping your car. But what are the chances you're going to keep the car long enough to need struts again?
Exactly.
We don't sell struts when the car needs it anyway. At 80,000 miles, we're not recommending them, right?
Who's going to have their car to 200,000 miles?
Nobody.
Well, because I have a client here locally that's a Nissan store. So I generally would take my Wrangler in for service at the Nissan store. There's a Chrysler store is across the street. So I will always ask them, hey, will you go across the street to get the CDJR oil filter, air filter? I'd like to have specific things that I would want for to be factory, right? The other stuff, I don't really care. I have a mindset about the oil filters and those things. I want it to fit perfectly. I want it to be the right one. Back in the good old days, I don't even know if they still have check valves in the oil filters, but there was that time when they had the check valves and that was stuck in my brain. So I want to make sure I have the right oil filter for my car, but anything else, I'm pretty much okay with a standard part on my car. So it's not going to matter to me.
No, I agree. I think the oil filter is a big thing, and I think there's more to it. The check valve is one thing; they still do have them in there, and then the other thing is the quality of the oil filter, right? It's a very important part. It's like the quality of your liver, right? That's filter in your blood, so you want to have a good filter. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the other stuff doesn't really, unless it's a classic and you want to maintain the original OEM stuff, But I agree with you 100%. And when you get into, I don't know, some of the even older cars, I don't know if we've talked about it, but I've had it before where you have to be competitive, right? Somebody's got a 10-year-old car, you got to be a little careful banging them out for full pop on the door rate, full pop on the factory parts, the whole bit, right? I mean, you're going to lose those deals 100% of the time unless you're
exactly.
reasonable. Unless you
We
have
did
to be
that.
reasonable.
Yeah, I remember in the Porsche Ferrari days, we would compete with the independents, because it was such a unique vehicle, and people would go to the Porsche, mechanic down the street. They had their guy that took care of their Porsche. The Ferrari people had a guy that would take care of their car. So we really were in competition with them a lot of times, and so we had to. And obviously, you wanted your Ferrari to be a Ferrari or your Porsche, whatever, but you liked your guy, and they weren't gonna. They often would use our parts. They would use our parts, but we always had to be competitive in that nature, in that realm with the independent shop in that particular world. So I'm totally good with it. I would think that's probably one of the best things that somebody can do right now is have a third party aftermarket, whatever you want to call it, parts selection. It's the best thing you could ever do.
Oh, I agree 100%. And then one of the aftermarkets, one of my guys in one of my stores that we're trying to get together with these guys to put a thing together. They're actually offering for dealerships that if you join their program, if I do work on a car and I put their parts in, it's got a nationwide guarantee. So there's other
Yeah.
dealers and any, Napa, whatever, I think it was Napa, any Napa place, then they'll honor the warranty and vice versa. Like I could honor the warranty if work was done at a Napa in Ohio, customers traveling through Pennsylvania, and they oh, I got a problem with my brakes. They were just installed. Hold on, the nearest place is, Mike Piazza Honda. They'll do it for you, whatever it is, which is great because now you got what, 5,000 of these parts stores around the country, right? However many they have. So you're getting a name recognition that way. And again, a part's a part, right? Like I said, a lot of times they come off the same assembly line anyway. It doesn't even matter.
Well, then that goes back to the manufacturer, parts loyalty programs, and there's where then now your parts manager is going to get all wigged out because, I got to meet a certain, I got to meet a certain percentage, or I'm not going to get my loyalty dollars, and so on. I'm sure you're an expert on all of those arguments.
Well, there is, it's funny. You got some manufacturers now, they're getting smarter and smarter or clever, just, whatever you want to call it. They got their fingers and everything. So they measure loyalty now. And they're getting slick since they're in our systems. They look at everything, right? Some of them are better than others, but they actually look at the repair orders and they look at parts sold on the repair orders. So it's, because they don't really have any other way of telling, right? Unless they're in your system, unless they're in like you have a RIM or, an inventory management system where they look at it. But most of them aren't that smart. They're really not. Like it's funny because I get the things from the different OEMs and they'll tell me, you sold 100 timing belts for 1,000 ROs. And I'm like, well, you don't know how many I sold because you don't look at what I sold. I bought 1,000 timing belts for the 1,000 ROs I closed, right? And they're like, oh, yeah. We don't see your closed ROs. I'm like, which is bullshit. You do see it, right? I know you do. You just don't have the algorithm set up to measure it, right? But they're getting more and more, the manufacturers are getting to where they look at the ROs, even internals on like certified and used cars. They're looking at the part numbers that you sell on the ROs now.
Yeah, yeah.
They're all getting slick, but it is what it is.
But what do you want? Excuse me, I lose my voice. If I'm an auto manufacturer, of course I want to sell my own parts, no matter how you slice
Well,
it,
they
right?
make
I want
more
to sell my
money
own
on parts than anything else, right?
Well, right. But if I'm a consumer and I leave, and like you said, I leave the dealership, I defect, and I'm going to go to the independent shop, you'd lost me forever. And so why wouldn't there be, some sort of gray area, some sort of option? A customer's got to have that choice because, again, the economy, it's terrible. The prices are outrageous. And it seems like there's so many times when the auto manufacturer and the dealership become at odds, and the dealer's trying to retain the customer correctly and doing whatever it takes to maintain that customer. And the manufacturer's over here saying, sorry, slap your hand. You can't do that. You can't do that. And then then at the same time, then they slap us around because our retention rate went down, instead of working in conjunction with each other.
Yeah, well, that's one of the topics I can go off on is the retention thing, right? Because we get a bad rap, dealers, we get a bad rap for, sucking at retaining our customers, right? And, listen, we're not perfect. Dealers, we make mistakes. We've historically had our flaws, right? But the manufacturer does drive some of that behavior, right? So, like you just said, if they're going to grade my loyalty on parts, they'd rather see the customer leave without me doing the work, right? In essence, that's
Right.
what they're saying, right? In a
That's what they're
perfect,
saying. Absolutely.
right? Because the customer, and they'll tell you, oh, you should lower your prices. You should be a little bit. Well, maybe you should lower your prices then. How about some of the manufacturers? BMW has a value line for brake pads and rotors and some maintenance stuff. And I tell you, we do a good volume of that. And then at the end of the month, we bill everything out of cost, and then they give us they give us whatever 15% back, with our markup comes back before the month closes. Yeah, I mean, it's we never told the story, but you can do in the 1990s. I'm working at a Chrysler store, and I have a customer comes in and has a bubble in a tire, and I say to my rep, "Is this under warranty?" And he goes, "Well, what's the policy and procedure manual say?" Good question. Let me look it up. The policy and procedure manual says that I should send that customer to the store where the tire is sold, so Goodyear, Firestone. So I said, wait a second, I'm supposed to send my customer to Firestone to get a tire
Yeah.
done? Oh, yeah, right. I said, well, it's the option 2. I could take the tire off and I could run it down to Firestone and I could get that customer a new tire. Or 3, the least one they wanted you to do was I could get a tire, put it on the customer's car, Goodwill it. I had to sell it at cost, and Chrysler would pay the bill, right?
Okay.
So this was my 3 options reading the policy and procedure manual. This is a true story. Anybody who was around in the 90s will tell you this. And this was every manufacturer. This was not just Chrysler, right? So in essence, they would tell you to send your customer to a tire store. These same hypocrites tell you that as a dealer, you suck because you lose people to independence. Meanwhile, their procedure forced you, they basically told you to do that, right? And then all of a sudden in 2001, Toyota got linked up with Dealer Tire. All of a sudden now tires are a retention tool. Now we should be in the tire business. So for the first 100 friggin' years, it was car dealerships. We weren't allowed to do anything with tires, right? Now, 25 years later, we suck. It's our fault that we didn't retain customers from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, right?
Exactly. I love that. I love the whole around the wheel program when Ford came out in 1997. I have a whole training on the evolution of multi-points. But yeah, when Ford came out with that, it's like, get the tires off the car. You need to be in the tire business, right? And I think many of us had already, I know that there was a great deal of people that were not forward thinking, but so many of us, when that came out, we were like, we did that like years ago, in the manufacturer, it took such a long time to catch up to taking care of customers, taking care of those people. And then it was absolutely terrible what we were required to do back then. Was the most uncustomer friendly type of stuff that you could. It's like dealing with the government.
But they make it like the dealers were terrible. We're following the rules, And I was at this Toyota store in 2000, 2001, and they did a great job before I got there selling tires. They were buying tires from a local Sunoco that was an authorized Firestone dealer. All right. And they would buy them at wholesale and then they would resell them. And they were probably doing 4,000 tires a year. They were doing pretty good, which was really the first dealership I ever worked at that actually had a legitimate tire business. Right. And then like 2 years in, we were doing better and better with it. We had, we would get different brand tires, but mostly it was Firestone at the time. Then Dealer Tire came in, Toyota linked up with Dealer Tire, and they really started grading us on us buying tires from the outside and not buying them from them, right? So then, of course, they had their little fingers and everything, right? And then eventually when they made the tires a part number on the factory master, it just made it a no-brainer. So you can now order through the system, you know what I mean? Like you had regular part numbers for this stuff. But, I always laughed at that. But, General Motors, Ford was probably the first one to jump on that in the domestic world. I know Toyota was a big jump on the tires in the early 2000s. It's taken a lot of other car lines to get in that game. I mean, it's just really, it's amazing how, and that's the one big retention tool, right? And then, there's a good, better, best brand too for tires, like aftermarket parts, same thing for good, better, best. I can tell you now, a lot of times we have to go to aftermarket or local guys to get tires to put on used cars. We can't afford the factory tire program sometimes because they raise the prices there too, So
one day I'll have to tell you my vision. I was going to start a used tire store. It was going to be called Treads, Tires for Life in Key West, Florida. That was when I was young and I was going to move to Key West and I was going to open up a tire store and we were going to sell used tires. I love that. I love the used tire program. A tire guy introduced me to that way back in the
Yeah.
day, Gooding Park. And I love tires. I'm just like a tire junkie now
Yeah.
because I learned all about tires back then.
There's a lot of places you ride down to Philadelphia, you ride down some of these inner city areas, and these guys that got these little shacks with tires on it. And you know, half of those things they stole out of the back of a dealership that we
Exactly.
on our used cars that that had with 430 seconds left on a tire, and these guys are scooping them up and reselling them. You know damn well
Oh,
we're
yeah.
doing it. Yeah,
You can buy in Orlando, you can buy train cars full of tires for nothing,
right.
$1,000 and you can get a container full of tires that all are, say 430 seconds or greater, and they'll drop them off at your location, And I had talked to a really sharp fixed ops guy out in Arizona one time, and he's like, "Steve, that's a great business." He goes, "If we just sold the used tires to our used car department, we'd make a killing, bro." And it's so fun though. There's so many cool things that we can do to get into other businesses or other things, but you sometimes feel like you're going behind the manufacturer's back, right? You
You do.
got to do these things in spite of, what the auto manufacturer wants. And I think that's the criminal part of the whole thing is we are really, I think, and I know a lot of car dealers. I travel, my whole life. And I think for the most part, people that hire me and the groups that I work with are pretty sharp, individuals. And so they are looking for things that they can do better and finding different ways. And I wouldn't doubt that there are other people that are not, but there's a lot of great people out there. And sometimes you gotta liberate them. You gotta let them go free. You gotta let them make these, do these cool things because that's how the manufacturers got into tires in the first place is probably guys like you were selling the crap out of tires. And they're like, holy cow, Dave's selling tires. What's he doing? How's that happening? But anyway, we got off. That's a long way off.
No, but it's all the same thing. Listen, tires are considered aftermarket parts. It really is.
That's true.
Since they manufacture linked up with Dealer Tire or Tire Rack or whatever it is, right now they're OEM parts, right? Because they get their piece of the pie. That's all it is to it. So I think that's
Well, maybe I'll say maybe one day they'll put tire maintenance in the factory in the owner's manual about alignments. Proper
Yep.
tire maintenance is one balance, one rotation, and what is it? Two rotations, one balance, and one alignment. Right? That's proper rotation. Doesn't say it anywhere. Nothing in the manufacturer's world.
Nope. It's still in the tire manual. They still consider it a redheaded stepchild when it comes to even warranty. Like you can warranty things now. You have a little bit better. You have the road hazard and stuff. Some of the times through the manufacturer's agent or whatever. Yeah, it's still, tire defects are still it's still considered a goodwill repair, right? It's not factory warranty because they don't want to warranty the tires, but
Well, how about this? Hey, side note, right? Now the auto manufacturer, General Motors, is in bed with one of the fluid maintenance providers. And so now all of a sudden, before a year ago, it was taboo. Do not put this in the car. And then all of a sudden they're having problems with the engines or carbon or whatever. And now they're like, oh no, you must use X, Y, and Z product, in your engine. Oh, by the way, instead of buying it from them for, $12, you got to buy it from us where we're going to charge you, $45 or whatever, because GM's now got to get a piece of the pie, from them. And now what just happened? They've priced it out of the marketplace.
Yep.
It's such a ridiculous service now that it's to do a carbon service or whatever the hell that service is called. It's such a it's ridiculously expensive. Before we could sell it for 100, now we have to sell it for 250 to make a profit on it. But it's okay now.
There was a manufacturer in the early 2000s. Same thing, like Honda is, they every once in a while they come out with their no additives policy and they just start hammering you about this stuff, right? This other manufacturer was doing the same thing and they were really riding hard. Like they'd go visit your parts department, walk around your parts department, look on the shelves, the whole bit, right? And then all of a sudden, same thing, they came out with their brand of
Yeah.
oil additives, right? And those were okay. Now those were reasonable. They didn't bang us out and everything else, but it was the same thing as GM did. And I think Ford just did it too. Yeah, they rebranded one of the aftermarket fluid providers. And listen, they all figured out eventually. Now I heard actually interesting story on that with GM is that they are actually doing studies and they were finding that when they do the map around dealers that were doing really good with their maintenance services and their additive business, there was lower powertrain repairs in those areas. So they were trying to make their own additive for years. And they just gave up. They said, screw it. Why don't we just use the one the dealers are using and rebrand it, right? But they actually did research on it, and they said, this is a rumor, I heard this, but it's probably true, right? Is all of a sudden, there's less engine repairs, there's less warranty, transmission and differential repairs near these dealers that are doing this stuff. Maybe we should look into some of these additives, right?
Amazing. It's amazing.
Right. It is amazing, right? But I love some of these brands that just, they want to stick by their guns for really ridiculous reasons. And it's only because they don't have their fingers in the pie. It's the only reason.
Yeah, I trained for one of the manufacturers. I'm not going to say which one, but I trained with the field reps at one time, and they were so anti-fluid, anti-this, anything that had to do with non-factory parts. But then they got into it. You're exactly right. They rebranded one of the fluid maintenance providers and they put it under their brand. They're like, "Oh, this is the greatest thing ever. This is the best thing we could ever do is put this in the car." I'm like, I'm looking at the bulletin from yesterday.
So funny. That's why people, you have to remember, you got to believe. The old expression is believe half of what you see and even less of what you hear, right? You really have to live by that because, people, they will change their mind in a blink.
Well, I worked for Audi for a while, and I had the world's greatest shop foreman, Tim. And Tim, he had been with Audi his whole life, and this guy was brilliant. He was a freaking off the chart, amazing shop foreman. And what he would tell us is if you do an Audi campaign or recall, you print it out and you attach it to the repair order. Because when you get audited, the manufacturer's going to come in and they will change their bulletins midstream and they will charge you back. And so, we went through, through our annual audit with Audi, and Tim was just like bulletproof because he just knew that they were going to try to screw you over. And, Tim protected us. He was pretty fantastic because they would sure enough change the time, change this, change that, and charge us back because they changed their mind.
Right. No, so listen, you got to cover your ass, man. CYA. That's what you got to do. Warranty. Yeah.
I love Tim. I miss him. Oh, that's hilarious, Well, we're pushing up on about 30 minutes. So why don't we have a GM tip of the day about parts?
The GM tip of the day, I would say, let's make sure that, it starts, a simple place to start would be used cars. Make sure that these cars, that not certified, but let's make sure that you're getting aftermarket parts and let's say at least pricing it out. Some good, better, best on the tires. Let's make sure that we're not just getting quoted for factory parts all the time. There's nothing wrong with using them on older cars. Obviously, you use them on different brands. You're not going to go to the Chevy dealer and buy Chevy parts all the time, right, for the used car. So, start doing that. And then, maybe look at some of the work that's been declined and pick up the phone and call a customer. You could do some surveys, find out why didn't you have this work done? 9 out of 10 times that car is 6 years old or older. It's the price of the repair and it starts with parts, right? So you're losing the job, you're losing it down the street. And then, again, you're going to be the guy that has no loyalty and no retention, right? You suck, because you didn't offer the aftermarket parts. So I would say start with the used cars, look at that first and then work your way back and see what you got.
Sounds great. Perfect. Well, let's get out of here. I'm going to go rest my voice for class tomorrow, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right, bro. I'll talk to you.
Fixed Ops Focus is associated with acute profitability inflammation, CSI score elevation, and reduced advisor deflection syndrome. Like and subscribe on every platform, or prepare for progressive deterioration. Missed ETAs spreading like rust, service managers developing stress hives, and GMs facing the ultimate side effect. Chapter 11 whispers, take as directed.